All right, we're in the last of our conversation on love. And last week, I had to kind of cut us off. That's the anticipation factor. So last week, we were taking a look at the what is commonly known as the love chapter in 1 Corinthians 13. And we were looking at Paul's description of what it is that love does. Love is more than an emotion. Love is more than a feeling. Love actually does. And we laid a little bit of background for the book of Corinthians. And I think it's really important because Paul, if I don't understand the background, I look at Corinthians 13 from the standpoint of a romantic context, right? Because that's often when we like, I'm doing Mike's wedding this afternoon. They had a great rehearsal dinner last night, and Romans 13 is part of the ceremony, and we oftentimes think of it only in that context. But what Paul was doing, the Corinthian church had challenges. They had challenges in terms of socioeconomic challenges because there were very rich people in the Corinthian church and there were very poor people in the Corinthian church, and those socioeconomic differences were affecting their unity and their fellowship in the church. And not only did they have socioeconomic differences, but they just had folks that just didn't like each other. They were suing each other and taking each other to court. And Paul was like, hey, man, we don't roll like that. We God's people. We shouldn't be rolling like that. And the Corinthian church had all of these spiritual gifts. And Paul acknowledged that in terms of expressions of the gifts of the Spirit, they had them. They had them all. But yet, they were still immature and carnal in the way that they functioned and operated. So coming out of chapter 12, where he talks about the unity of the body and how we need each other, and the arm can't say, I don't need the toe, and all of that, and the knee bone's connected to the hip bone, all of that. Coming out of there, he makes this astonishing statement, and he says, and yet show I to you a more excellent way. And so what he does is he throws down the table that there is a way that's above our pettiness, that's above our fighting, that's above our desire to express outward expressions of spirituality. And he says that more excellent way is love. And that's how he transitions in to 1 Corinthians 13. And he starts off in 1 Corinthians 13. Let's take a look at this really quick, because I can't get stuck here. So he starts off and he identifies and he says, listen, if I could speak with the tongues of men and angels, and if I had the gifts of prophecy, and if I understood knowledge, if I had all of these deep spiritual things, but yet I didn't love. And remember what we define love as, the Dave Jones Modern Dictionary of New Testament Words. Anybody remember the definition of love? Our working definition? Love is a commitment to give of myself in every area for the good of another through the power of God. Say that with me. Love is a commitment to give of myself in every area for the good of another through the power of God. So Paul is saying here, you can have all this spiritual stuff, but if you ain't got love, it doesn't mean anything. And then he says, even if you gave your body to be burned, even if you did all of these morally correct things on the outside, if you were generous and you went down to the soup kitchens and you did all of this stuff and you gave to the Red Cross and you volunteered, once a month, and you gave away your grandbaby's little baby clothes to the shelter, and it just broke your heart when you gave them away. He says none of that means anything if it doesn't have love. And so what Paul was saying is that love is the preeminent thing above everything else that we do. Love. It's not our spiritual gifts. It's not our sense of morality and doing good deeds. It's love, our commitment to give of ourselves in every area for the benefit of another through the power of God. He says it really means nothing. So then we jumped down and we took a look at how does love respond? How does love respond? And we said love responds in three different ways. First of all, we said, how does love respond to hurts? How does love respond to hurt? When you are hurt, how does love respond? Well, love is patient and is kind. That's how love responds to hurts. It's not, I'm going to get you. Payback is no. Y'all thought, he ain't going to go there, is he? So, he ain't going there, is he? Then we looked at how love responds to differences. It doesn't envy or boast. Because again, the Corinthian church, they were boastful or envious about their differences, right? So love doesn't compare. Love doesn't look at what you got and what I have and compare to see whether I need to boast about it because I got more or whether I need to be envious about it because you got more. Love doesn't do that. And then we ended up at, well, how does love respond to failure? And this is where I want to pick up the conversation at. How does love respond to failure? And again, what's really important for us to understand about this context is Paul is writing this, and this is a little tricky because he's writing this not so much as a checklist for us, as much as he's writing it as a calibration for us, right? Because I can tell you, if you set out to treat this like a checklist, but it's a way for us to calibrate ourselves, to see how we are aligned, to see the attitudes and the conditions of our heart. And he lays out in terms of how does love respond to failure. Let me ask, how many of us here have ever failed? Okay, all of us have failed. How many of us here have had people fail us? Okay. How many of us here know we failed God? So here's the reality, right? Failure is a human experience. Failure is a constancy. And if we are going to be able to love other people and walk in relationship with other people, right? Because again, love isn't just about how I feel about God, it's how I feel about my brother. If I'm going to keep the new commandment that Jesus said, love God, then love my neighbor, I'm going to have to understand how to deal with my neighbor's failure. Because our tendency is, if we deal with folk that fail too much, what do? Cut them off. I got time for that. So here there's a prescription that's laid out for us. So let's look at 1 Corinthians 13, 6, 8. I only have a few moments, and we're going to try to extract some juice out of this orange. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 6, 8, Paul says this in terms of how love responds to failure. He says, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Some of your translation says, rejoices when the truth wins out. Watch this. It always protects. It always protects. First thing that love does in response to failure, because there's four of them, but the first thing that love does in response to failure is it always protects. Some of you who have a King James, your King James will says it bears all things. The root word here for bear all things or protect, the root word for that means to cover. It means not to bury or deny. It's a concept of protecting by covering or fending off whatever threatens. Love protects, it shields, it guards, it covers, it conceals, and it safeguards people from exposure, like a roof on a house. Your roof provides a covering, it provides protection, it shields, it's a safeguard. Love protects. 1 Peter 4:8 says it this way. Above all things, have fervent love for one another. Why? For love will do what? Cover a multitude of sins. You see, love doesn't mean that we try to isolate them or insulate them from the consequences of their actions. No. But it means that we seek to walk with them, that we seek to help to protect them. We don't put their business out there in the street. We don't try to ruin their reputations. What if God put your business, your failure, out on the street? Because he know it all, right? He know it all. So what if you woke up tomorrow morning, right? And God had the Dave Jones Failure Facebook page. And on that Facebook page, all my mess was blasted out there. What about your Facebook page? How would you feel? See, love doesn't do that. Love protects because God is love and God protects. Look at Romans 5:8 says. Romans 5:8 says this. Here's how God protects us. Here's how God covers us. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God was protecting us while we were still sinners until we could come to faith. While the world was still anti-God, Jesus went to the cross to provide protection and covering for sin even before man was ready to receive it. See, because we always want to wait till somebody qualifies or meets our conditions and criteria before we want to bestow any benevolence. Here's the last thing I want you to think about. Love covers, love protects, love conceals. If I love God, like I say I love God, then I should be interested in covering, protecting, concealing his reputation. That means that how I walk, how people view me, things I do, don't say, don't say, that because I've named the name of Christ, for many people, I'm the only Jesus they're ever going to see. So my lifestyle and my conduct, out of love for God, should protect his reputation, should protect his name. Does that make sense? Now watch this. Can we bump it up a notch like Emerald? Pow! Watch this. We have all committed to this fellowship thing here called New Vision. Love protects the reputation of New Vision. Because if we love New Vision, we love each other, then we're going to be cognizant that when I'm out there doing whatever it is I'm doing, that's reflecting on our reputation. And love seeks to conceal and to protect from that which threatens. Love. Love covers, love protects, love conceals. God loved, covered, protected us. He covered, protected Israel. We ought to love, cover, and protect God's reputation, and we ought to love, cover, and protect the reputation of each other by how we live and by how we walk. Second thing that love does is not only does love, in response to failure, protect, but it says that love always trusts. Always trust. And I need to emphasize here something with this always, right? Because in all of these, it's always, always, always. It don't take time out. It don't take a break. It's not circumstantial, situational. This is a permanency, a consistency of response of love. This is how you know it's love, because this is what it always does. Like water is always wet, right? It's always wet. Even if it's in ice form, hold it for a little while, it's going to be wet. Even if in steam form, what's it going to do? It's going to put moisture on something because it's wet. It's always wet. And so when we think about these things and we're using them as a calibration, there's permanency in what it does because it always protects. And then it always trusts. Trust, the concept of placing confidence in, trusting in the person's intentions. Love believes the best, but it's not naive. Love believes the best about someone's intentions. Love, and this is hard, see, because I'm telling you, this is hard, right? Because love doesn't say, oh, well, you know, they've always been trifling. They've always been roguish. So y'all don't even know what that word is, roguish. Anybody my age? Y'all know roguish? No. Tell us. Nobody know roguish? Yeah, right. Look it up in the dictionary. Use it in the well, that was back in the days of Kangos. I'm sorry, that's way. That's just somebody that's just downright dirty, doggish. They'll steal as soon as you turn your back, just roguish. Just, you know. All right, yeah. So here's the ideal. Love always trusts. Love always implies on the part of the person good intentions and that they want to do right. Love believes, it trusts that someone will choose what is right. Love positions itself in trusting to be vulnerable to folks. Because I'm believing they're going to want to do the right thing. And I'm making myself vulnerable even though they may not. Again, love trust, but it's not naive because I know you're thinking, wait, how does that work? And again, we have to get out of our limited thinking about these and begin and see them from the perspective of God. Love always trusts someone's good intentions. Love makes itself vulnerable to people because we expect them to do the right thing. We expect them to make good choices. Isn't that what God does to you? God doesn't deal with you tomorrow based upon the bad choices you made yesterday. Does he? Because you'd be cut off. We'd be cut off. It'd be over. It wouldn't be no tomorrow. He always believes. He always has hope and expectation that good is going to come out, that our intentions will be noble, that our intentions will be right. That's what love does. It makes itself vulnerable. Do you see good in others? Do you focus on the possibilities? Even when those possibilities aren't really obvious, even when there's nothing on the surface that tells you trust, believe in that person's good intentions. Because let me qualify something. When I say trust, right? Trust that roguish person is going to want to do the right thing and that God can work on them to get them to do the right thing. That doesn't mean you're going to give that roguish person your wallet. That's being naive. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's about the expectation that that person wants to do good and that God could work in that individual both to will and to do of his good pleasure. That's what love does. It keeps extending opportunities for other people in spite of themselves. Love doesn't know how to quit or throw in the towel. Love is committed to trusting and always being there. Look at Romans 8:28. Always trust. So here's something that we have to have towards God. Love towards God. We know that all things work together for the good for those who what? Love him and who have been called according to his purpose. So we have to believe that in everything that comes in our lives, God has an intention of good for everything that comes into our lives, even the things that are painful, even the things that press on us, even when we've lost loved ones. But God has an intention of taking those things and making them work out for good. So that trust, always trusting, has a horizontal and a vertical response. Love always trusts. Do you believe or trust that people will choose what is right? Or do you anticipate failure and respond to them in anticipation of the failure that has not yet happened because they failed in the past? What if he did us like that? And we always have our way of justifying why we do that with people, right? What if he did us like that? See, he doesn't because he always trusts. Because that's what love does, and God is love. Does that make sense? I'm trying to take these things and take them out of the abstract and try to boil them down as practical as I can. So the next thing that love does is love always protects, love always trusts, love always hopes. Love always hopes in the face of failure. Hope is a favorable, confident expectation. It gets its origins from the root word wish. Oh, I wish. See, when you talk about, oh, I wish this would happen, right? Think about what you wish for, right? Think about when you bought that lottery ticket. You was wishing. You got in the car and you was already, oh, I would do this, right? Wish has these favorable emotions and expectations that are attached to it, right? The root word for hope comes from wish. That hope has these favorable expectations and anticipations of that people are going to do right. They're going to be right. One of the things that we ground and we base, that love grounds and bases its hope in, is God's sovereignty, God's power, and God's promises. Not necessarily in that person's ability to change. And say that again. Hope, love that always hopes, is grounded in God's sovereignty, God's promises, and God's power, not in that individual's capacity to change. That's why it's hard for us when we look at people in their failure to have hope for them, because we're looking at them. But it's not them. See, our hope is in God, that God can change, that God can transform them just like he did you. Love hopes for a good outcome. Not only does it hope for a good outcome, but it expects to see it. Love has the best wishes and highest expectations for people, even in the midst of their failure. Look at Romans 8, 24, 25. I love this verse. I'm about to get out your way. Romans 8, 24, 25. It says, but hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what he already has? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. Love always hopes. Hope is not based upon what's seen. Hope isn't based upon what you have. So when we look at people and we look at the failure of people, we have hope not because of what we see. If you see it and have it, there's no need to hope for it. Let me say that again. If you see it and have it, there's no need to hope for it. Hope is based upon the anticipation of having something that does not yet manifest or look possible. Does that make sense? Because that's what he does with us. One of my favorite verses is Jeremiah 29:11. And in Jeremiah 29:11, it's really interesting because Jeremiah 29:11, Israel is being led off into Babylonian captivity. A captivity that is the result of their own disobedience and rebellion. They put themselves in that situation. Because how many of us at times, when we look at people's failure, we say, well, shoot, they did that to themselves. They put themselves, don't be calling me, asking me for no money. You shouldn't have done it. I told you you shouldn't have done it. Here, Israel is in a position of failure of their own making. And God has the prophet Jeremiah standing up on a hill as they are being led off into Babylonian captivity in chains. God's promised people, covenant people. And the prophet stands on the hill and he yells, I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for good and not evil. Plans to prosper you, to give you a hope and a future. There was nothing in their present. Nothing in their present. But God says, my expectation for you is about a hope and a future. Even though your failure put you in this, God was dealing with Israel not based on their failure and the circumstances of their failure, but based on hope, expectation, and the future. See, that's why he says, he that began a good work in you, he shall bring that work to completion until the very day of Christ. So God looks at you, and he ain't studying this. He said, I'm going to keep working. Well, why am I going to keep working? I'm going to keep working until the day they become like Jesus. I acknowledge this. Yeah, Israel, you in chains. Yep, it's the fruit of your own rebellion and disobedience. But I'm looking at the future. I got hope and expectation for something good to come. Now, let's just be honest for a moment. In dealing with the failures of men and others, that's hard, ain't it? That's hard. Let's just not kid ourselves and be super spiritual. That's hard. You can't do that without being in relationship with God. Because, again, that's making ourselves vulnerable. That's putting ourselves out there. And our natural tendency is to try to qualify people. Love always hopes. Love hopes that the power of the Holy Spirit, that the grace of Christ can make transformation and change. Love hopes that the present won't be the future. Love. And let me add this. Not only does it hope it, but it speaks it. Because God didn't just have a hope, an unexpressed hope for Israel. He declared and spoke it. So, what are you saying? What are you speaking in regards to those who, as you hear this, you say, that's challenging. That's a stretch there, brother. You're going to have to pray for me on that one. What are you saying and speaking concerning that situation or that person? That's the indication of whether or not you have hope or not. What are you believing for? Lastly, love always perseveres. Love always perseveres. That word persevere means it endures. It literally, the word means a super abiding, a sense of being patient in the face of suffering. It's the root for a common military word with the ideal of a soldier's refusal to be left behind, or a soldier's refusal to run in the face of the enemy or the adversary. I used to be in the military for a short while, and when you would have guard duty, right? So we used to have to guard the motor pool. And I used to be standing out there 2 o'clock in the morning like, ain't nobody coming stealing these trucks? Why in the world are we standing out here 2 o'clock in the morning? And you'd be standing there, and then sometimes it would rain. You couldn't leave your post. You'd be court-martialed for leaving your post. You had to be persistent. You had to endure all things. And it's interesting that this is the last thing that Paul describes in terms of the functionality of love. That it endures all things. It never leaves its post. It is persistent. No matter what comes its way, no matter what obstacles that come its way, it actively tolerates and stands with the person, actively tolerates and stands with the person through adversity and failure. That's hard. Can I just tell you why that's hard? And maybe you can connect with this. Here's why that's hard, right? It's hard because life is challenging and life is busy, right? And it's hard just to try to find some me time, ain't it? Just to get some me time, right? You ain't asking for much. You just asking for, can I just get like an hour, 2 hours, just to do me, just to kind of, right? How many people struggle trying to get some me time? And then here's the challenge, right? Here's the challenge. You feel like you ain't even got time for you. And then here comes this person and their failure for the 11th time. And you like my daughter Jency always says, I can't. That's her thing. I can't. She's got to move her head and all this. I can't, right? You be like, I can't. You look at the phone, you be like, I can't. Now, am I speaking real here? Yes, you are. But love, when it's real love, when it's empowered by the Holy Spirit, it doesn't leave its post. Love actively tolerates and stands with people through their adversity and their failure. That's laying down your life for the sake of the brethren. That's when you need that me time badly, but you decide to let love be active in your life. And you say, Lord, because I do this all the time. Okay, Lord, I'm about to pick up this phone. There's nothing in me that wants to have this conversation. But Father, I need to be the extension of your love for this person right now. And I don't have it in me. But by faith, Lord, I'm going to trust that you're going to speak to me. That's how it works, man. There's no magic potion on this stuff, man. It's in those kind of moments, man, that this stuff happens, because we can talk about love in a broad, esoteric sense. Oh, love, yeah, love, oh. Right? But you got to get it down. You got to get it down, because that's where it lives, and that's where we struggle. And because we struggle, we limit and block what God can flow through us for others. And not only that, but we limit what our natural, limited minds can comprehend about God. There are some things about God that you and I are only going to be able to comprehend experientially. You can't study it. You can't read it in a devotion. You can't get it out of a commentary. You ain't going to get it through a worship song. It's only going to come experientially. When you decide to allow God to work through you to love others like he loves you. It's the only way. And at the moment of that crossroads, in the moment of the placing of that demand for love to be expressed to you, ain't nobody else going to be there. There will be no one else there. There will be no coach. You can't pick up the phone. It's whether or not you're going to surrender your will to the prompting of the Holy Spirit or not. That's where that thing lives and dies. That's the root of the matter. And the encouragement is, he wants to help you. He desires to help you. He's able to help you. So here's what we said. Has this been practical for you? Here's what this says. And listen. You can't do this. You can't. But he can. You and I, but he can. And when we hear this, it's got to draw us to him for his strength and power. So we've said, how does love respond to hurts, to differences and failure? Well, this is what we said. Love always trusts, always hopes. Always perseveres. Always. Now here's a question for you. I leave you with this question. What if everyone in the world would be like this? What if everyone, forget the world, let's just say the church. Forget the universal church. Let's just say here in New Vision. Can you imagine what it would be like if everyone actually loved? Just close your eyes for a minute. What would that be like? If we always trusted, always believed, always hoped, always persevered. If we never left our post. Well, here's a sobering fact. The only one we really have control over is ourselves. The only one we really have control over is ourselves. There was a song in the 70s. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. The only thing you can control is yourself. You could take this teaching and you could think people need to be more loving towards me, and identify all the people who didn't always trust, always believe, always hope, always persevere towards you. You could do that. It'll just leave you bitter. Or you could take this message and say, God, by your grace and power, I want to be that for somebody else. I want to be what I didn't receive, because I know in not receiving it what it did for me. I want to make sure that as far as I can control it, no one else has to experience that. So God, I, by your power, by your grace, I want to be committed to give of myself in every area for the good of another through the power of God. Because the only thing that I can really control is myself.